Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay today. I just want to introduce you to a few resources that might help you concerning the Harmony of the Resurrection account. If you go to www.tectonics.org, Greenleaf's Harmony of the Resurrection account, you'll get a good article there by an 1874 Harvard lawyer, professor and attorney Simon Greenleaf, who wrote about Testimony of the Evangelist, examined by the rules of evidence administered in courts of justice. And he has an article there that gives you a harmonization of the resurrection accounts. Greenleaf says the character of their narratives is like that of all other true witnesses concerning, as Dr. William Paley observes, substantial truth under circumstantial variety. There is enough of discrepancy to show that there could have been no previous concert among them, or collusion, and at the same time such substantial agreement as to show that they all were independent narrators of the same great transaction as the events actually occurred. Greenleaf's general discussion of the alleged discrepancies from Testimony of the Evangelist is in Appendix 1, and also see Appendix 2 for Dr. William Paley's commentary on From the Evidences of Christianity. Greenleaf, on writing his Harmony of the Resurrection, writes, "The narratives of the Evangelist are now submitted to the reader's perusal and examination, upon the principles and by the rules already stated. For this purpose, and for the sake of more ready and close comparison, they are arranged in juxtaposition after the general order of the latest and most approved harmonies. The question is not upon the strict propriety of the arrangement, but upon the veracity of the witnesses and the credibility of their narratives. With the relative merits of modern harmonies, and with the points of controversy among theologians, the writer has no concern. His business is that of a lawyer examining the testimony of witness by the rules of his profession, in order to ascertain whether, if they had thus testified an oath in court of justice, they would be entitled to credit, and whether their narratives as we now have them would be received as ancient documents coming from the proper custody. If so, then it is believed that every honest and impartial man will act consistently with that result, by receiving their testimony in all the extent of its import. To write out a full commentary or argument upon the text would be useless addition to the bulk of the volume, but a few notes have been added for illustration of the narratives, for the clearing up of apparent discrepancies, as being all the members of the legal profession would desire." So this is in part 9 of his book, Our Lord's Resurrection and His Subsequent Appearances and His Ascension. 40 days, page 483, 503, note on the first resurrection, P537549. The morning of the resurrection, first day of the week, he notes Mark 16:1, and when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. Matthew 28:24, and behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended and from heaven, and came and rolled back the stone from the door, and sat upon it. His countenance was the lightning, and his raiment white as snow, and for fear of him the keepers did shake, and became as dead men. The time of the resurrection, so he reads Matthew 26 verse 1 and 2, Mark 16:1 and 2 and 9, Mark 24:1, Luke 24:1, John chapter 20 verse 1 and 2, and he notes that the resurrection of our Lord took place before full daylight on the first day of the week. Follows from the unanimous testimony of the evangelist respecting the visit of the woman to the sepulchre. But the exact time on which he rose is nowhere specified. According to the Jewish mode of reckoning, the Sabbath ended and the next day began at sunset, so that if the resurrection occurred even before midnight, it would still have been upon the first day of the week, and the third day after the Lord's burial. The earthquake had taken place, and the stone had been rolled away before the arrival of the woman, and so far as the immediate narrative is concerned, there is nothing to show that all this might not have happened some hours earlier. Yet the words of Mark in another place render it certain that there could have been no great interval between these events and the arrival of the woman, since he affirms in verse 9 that Jesus had arisen early the first day of the week, while in verse 2 he states that the woman went out very early. A like inference may be drawn from the fact that the affrighted guards first went to inform the chief priests of the events when the woman returned to the city in Matthew 28, verse 11, for it hardly to be supposed that after having been thus terrified by the earthquake and the appearances of an angel, they would have waited any very long time before sending information to their employers. The body of Jesus had therefore probably laid in the tomb not less than about 36 hours. Then next, the visit of woman to the sepulchre. Matthew 26, verse 1 to 8. Mark 16, 1 to 8. Luke 24, 1 to 11. John 20, verse 1 and 2. The first notices we have of our Lord's resurrection are connected with the visit of the woman to the sepulchre on the morning of the first day of the week. According to Luke, the woman who had stood by the cross went home and rested during the Sabbath. And Mark adds that after the Sabbath was ended, that is, after sunset and during the evening, they prepared spices in order to go to embalm our Lord's body. They either were not aware of the previous embalming by Joseph and Nicodemus, or else they also wished to testify their respect and affection to their Lord by completing more perfectly what before had been done in haste. In John 19:40-42, it is not just this portion of the history which relates to the visit of the woman to the tomb and the appearance of Jesus to them that most of the alleged difficulties and discrepancies in this part of the gospel narratives are found. We will therefore take up the chief of them in the order. The time. All the evangelists agree in saying that the woman went out very early to the sepulchre. Matthew's expression is that day was dawning. Mark's words are very early, which indeed are less definite, but are appropriate to denote the same point of time. Luke has the more poetic term deep morning, i.e. early dawn, and John's language is likewise definite, early while it was yet dark. All these expressions go to fix the time at what we call early dawn or early twilight after the break of day, but while the light is yet struggling with darkness. Thus far there is no difficulty, and none would ever arise had not Mark added the phrase the sun being risen, or as the English version has it, at the rising of the sun. These words seem at first to be in direct variance with the very early of the Mark himself and with the language of the other evangelists. To harmonize this apparent discrepancy, we may premise that since Mark himself first specifies the point of time by a phrase sufficiently definite in itself, supported by all the other evangelists, we must conclude that when he adds the rising of the sun, he did not mean to contradict himself, but used this later phrase in a broader and less definite sense. As the sun is the source of light and of the day, and as his earliest rays produce the contrast between darkness and light, between night and dawn, so the term sunrising might easily come in popular language by a metonymy of cause for effect to be put for all that early interval when his rays, still struggling with darkness, do nevertheless usher in the day. Accordingly, we find such a popular usage prevailing among the Hebrews, and several instances of it occurred in the Old Testament. Thus in Judges 9:33, the message of Zebul to Abimelech, after directing him to lie in wait with his people in the field during the night, goes as follows. And it shall be, in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, thou shalt rise early and set upon the city. Yet we cannot for a moment suppose that Abimelech and with his subsecade was to wait until the sun actually appeared above the horizon before he made his onset. So the psalmist 104 verse 22, speaking of the young lions that by night roar after the prey, go on to say, the sun ariseth, they gather themselves together and lay them down in the dens. But wild animals do not wait for the actual appearance of the sun. They shrink away to their lairs the break of day, the dawning light at the signal of their retreat. See also 2 Kings chapter 3:22, 2 Samuel 23:4. In all these passages, the language is entirely parallel to that of Mark, and they serve fully to illustrate the principle that the rising of the sun is here used in a popular sense is equivalent to the rising of the day or early dawn. The number of women. Matthew mentions Mary Magdalene and other Mary. Verse 1, Mark enumerates Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Salome. Luke has Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and others with them. John speaks of Mary Magdalene alone and says nothing of the other. First three evangelists accord then in respect to the two Marys, but no further, while John differs from them all Is there a real discrepancy? We may add one answer, no, because according to the same canon of Leclerc, quipe plurae narrata pocoricari complexitor que pocoria memorat plosara noson negat, end of quote. Because John, in narrating circumstances with which he was personally connected, sees fit to mention only Mary Magdalene, it does not at all follow that others were not present. Because Matthew, perhaps for like reason, speaks only of two Marys, he by no means excludes the presence of others. Indeed, the very words which John puts into the mouth of Mary Magdalene presupposes the fact that others had gone with her to the sepulchre, that there was something in respect to Mary Magdalene which gave her a peculiar prominence in these transactions, may infer from the fact that not only John mentions her alone, but likewise all the other evangelists name her first, as if holding the most conspicuous place. The instance here under consideration is parallel to that of the demonics of Gadara and the blind men at Jericho, where in both cases Matthew speaks of two persons, while Mark and Luke mentioned only one. Sometimes peculiar in the station or in character of one of the persons, rendered him in each case more prominent, and led the two later evangelists to speak of him particularly. But there, as here, their language is not exclusive, nor is there in it anything that contradicts the statement of Matthew. The arrival of the sepulchre. According to Mark, Luke, and John, the woman on reaching the sepulchre found the great stone with which it had been closed already rolled away. Matthew, on the other hand, after narrating that the woman went out to see the sepulchre, proceeds to mention the earthquake, the descent of the angel, his rolling away the stone and sitting upon it, and the terror of the watch, as if all these things took place in the presence of the woman. The angel too addresses the woman as if still sitting upon the stone he had rolled away. The apparent discrepancy, if any, here arises simply from Matthew's brevity, omitting to state in full what his narrative purpose is. According to verse 6, Christ was already risen, and therefore the earthquake and its accompaniment must have taken place at the earlier point of time to which the sacred writer returns back in his narration. And although Matthew does not represent the woman as entering the sepulchre, yet he speaks of them as going out of it, so that the course of their interview with the angel took place not outside the sepulchre, but in it, as narrated by the other evangelist. When therefore the angel says to them, verse 6, come see place where the Lord lay, this is not said without the tomb to include them to enter, as Strauss avers, but within the sepulchre, just as in Mark 5:6. So that's just a little bit of Greenleaf's Harmony of the Resurrection accounts. You can go read the article on www.tectonics.org harmonize. And then there are some really helpful articles. You've got J. Patrick Holding, Harmonization, the Issue of Complementary Accounts, Part 1. J. Patrick Holding, Harmonization, the Issue of Complementary Accounts, Part 2, and then 3 and 4 and 5. Then you have Glenn Miller's. So if you type in James Patrick Holding, the Harmonization, the Issue of Complementary Accounts, and you'll get 5 articles altogether on harmonization of the resurrection accounts. If you go to Glenn Miller, his site on Christian Think Tank is absolutely awesome. And if you type in do the resurrection accounts hopelessly contradict one another, you'll find a wonderful article there, very scholarly, and lots of resources on harmonizing the gospel accounts of the resurrection. He uses about 8 scholars at the end, which are really, really good. Then you have John Ankenberger, Joel Weldon, an examination of the alleged contradictions in the Quran, narrators 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is very helpful. You've got Sam Shamoun, Shamoun, the resurrection accounts, which I think you might find on Apologetics Act 17 or Answering Islam. Then you have a book by R. Foster and P. Marston, The Resurrection of Jesus, a Harmony of the Resurrection Accounts, based upon an outline given in Reason and Faith, R. Foster and P. Marston, Monarch Publications, 1989, page 79 to 108. J. Harris Murray, J. Harris has an article called "A Suggested Harmonization of the Resurrection and Narratives." This is really good source, and it's 3 crucial questions about Jesus by Murray J. Harris, Baker Books, 1994, but I think you can read it on J.P. Holdings' site. You have Gary F. Ziola of Darkness to Light Ministries, Easter Harmony, very helpful. Jesus Christ Saves Ministries, Dan Barker's Easter Challenge, is a very helpful article. Peter Ballard, Harmonization of the Resurrection Accounts, is helpful. Steve Hendricks, Resurrection of Jesus Puzzle. These are articles that you can go and read if you type in. Then you have George Benson, History of Religion, Part 1, 2, and 3. Have a look at that book. John Eliot, The Harmony of the Gospels in the Holy History of the Humiliation and Sufferings of Jesus Christ from His Incarnation and His Death and Burial, 2 lines from Acts, Boston, 1678. Bartholomew Keeling, 8 Discourses on the Harmony of the First 3 Evangelists. James McKnight, Harmony of the 4 Gospels, Part 1 and 2. William Newcomb, Review of the Chief Difficulties in the Gospel History, 1791. So those are some articles, but if you want to get the list of that article, just type in www.tectonics.org harmonize Greenleaf, or typing www.tectonics.org and Greenleaf's Harmony of the Resurrection Accounts, and you'll get the information that's required there. So there we are. This is just a little encouragement to, don't abandon the faith just because you see apparent contradictions. I'll give you a little argument that is very helpful. Before I do, I want to give you one more resource that's helpful. The Ehrman Project. If you type in Ehrman Project on YouTube, they have some helpful information on harmonizing the Gospels. Now, and also I've done a series on inerrancy in the Gospels that's very helpful. But I want to give an argument, and that is the argument of plausibility structure. Epistemology, or the theory of knowledge, works on generally theories of probability. What that means is, so long as we have a plausibility structure for our position, we don't have to have all the anomalies sorted out. Now, if that's the case in scientific knowledge, then it should be the case in terms of historical knowledge. So long as we have a good plausibility structure for the position that we hold, sometimes we might not fully understand the minutiae detail. In the Gospel accounts, we have a plausibility structure, clear solid evidence for the death, the empty tomb, and the resurrection appearances of Jesus. Most scholars would agree that these 3 are a historical fact, although most scholars would say, even though they believe the early church preached that Christ rose from the dead, doesn't necessarily mean that it actually took place physically, but that's what they actually believed and preached. But those 3 points are done in history. They are solid, historical, factual pieces of information. So we're dealing with minutiae detail. And in history, when you study history, there always are anomalies and difficulties. But that doesn't put us off from knowing what the main grand facts are. So that's my argument from plausibility structure when you come to these difficult passages. Just look at them and realize that they might be hard to harmonize, but they in no way threatens that Christ rose from the dead, because the basic facts are already proven. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.